Hey everyone, welcome to the 435th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Alex Schwartz, Matt Urey, and Kevin O'Brien. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we are talking 2 wins and 2 losses. We'll see if we get through 4 wins total for each of us. 4 wins, 4 losses for each of us.
And what do you mean? What is a win and a loss?
Yeah, so wins and losses. We're in the world of advertising in particular. You win jobs or you lose jobs is the way they like to phrase it. For whatever reason, I'm sure there's some sort of hollowed tale of some...
The language is that you're awarded a job. But I did think if this format works, if we like it, if listeners like it, please email us while you're listening to this or at the end of this episode and tell us what you think.
Even better, share the episode to your peers, because if it means something to you, your director friends might appreciate hearing more about it.
Yeah, good point. But if this does work, I thought we could also apply it to not just obviously commercial jobs. Like you're up for a feature, you are pitching to a TV show, etc. You know, this podcast over the years has become about primarily 2 things, I think. One is, you know, as we get older, is like, how can you turn filmmaking into a sustainable career well into adulthood? Not just, you know, sleeping on couches, fundraising, you know, crowdfunding things to make your movies and hope to go to festivals, but also making a living and being able to afford to live in a city with a house and kids.
Sending your kids to college.
Yeah. So kind of like what the long game is. But the other thing that's very much related to that is, how do you get hired as a director? How do you get paid as a director? I think we've talked to a lot of people about the first time they got paid to direct, but I thought that this episode of like, hey, here's how we got 2 jobs and how we didn't get 2 jobs could be really helpful. And I think before we started recording, we tried to find for ourselves jobs that had some sort of teachable moment. So I think, you know, when you win a job, what I try to do is I try to find out why I won. And I usually try to find out who I was up against. And again, some jobs you're up against no one. You're just pitching a show and they decided to buy 5 shows and your show is not one of them.
Sure.
So you lost, but you're still, at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of money in the world that is being spent on filmmaking. And we are trying to compete to get a little chunk of that money. And ultimately, there is much less money than people that want that money to do filmmaking with.
You know, it's funny in you outlining, you know, pitching a show or something like that, or pitching a feature, pitching on an open directing assignment, like in this case, commercials, but features as well. That's more akin to each other than pitching your own original IP. And like the thing that makes it so different is that someone's going to make this commercial, right? And you just want it to be you when you're pitching. But if you pitch your television show, no one is going to make that show, right? Which is interesting. But then also the weird X factor there is that like taste becomes a totally different ballgame. Like what's trendy? What does the market want? What sort of like mood was the executive in? You know, you and I have both pitched a lot of narrative over the years, and like I can think of instances where like things went tremendously well and I sold something in the room, and I can think of it's like, oh, because the story I was pitching, one of the executives just related to in a very direct way, and that's luck ultimately, right?
Yeah, luck plus zeitgeist, you know, in a way.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Whereas like when you're on an assignment, someone has already done the work of figuring out what the zeitgeist or the market is requiring, because Taco Bell has a new taco that they need us to sell and somebody's got to sell it. You know?
But both of us have had so many meetings, especially kind of in our earlier years, that were narrative assignments. You know, just last week you talked about a show that you met the showrunners on to, you know, basically interview to direct some episodes of, you know, I've definitely pitched on features, you know, that I wanted to direct that I did not get. And a couple, I mean, I guess both of the features I directed, I did not, you know, originate the script. But I met the producers, the script already existed, and I had to prove to them why I should be the director. And I was successful in those cases, but unsuccessful in many other cases. So I think that the wins and the losses, yeah, you're right. When you're writing, when it's of your brain, it's a little bit of a different thing. But I think the challenge of being a director and a filmmaker, often uncredited in many of these things, most people don't know who directed their favorite episode of whatever Game of Thrones, or who directed their favorite commercial. But
I think about Breaking Bad all the time, actually, because that's one of the shows that's like heralded as one of the best of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, if you can name a director from that show, it's Rian Johnson. It's because he did like a couple.
Yeah, or Vince Gilligan, the creator.
Yeah. But honestly, like...
Or Bryan Cranston probably directed a couple episodes, I'm guessing.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, man.
And the directing on that show is incredible. I've watched that show twice.
But yeah, so I think one of the challenges of our job is to prove that we are the best person to make this show, to make this commercial. Like, oh, you got to get Matt Enlow to direct this cat food commercial because otherwise it's just not going to be good, where in reality, we're forgettable to the consumer, So I think that's part of why it's so competitive, because it's not just like, I have the best idea. It's this magic sauce of, are you the right person? Are you the right budget? Are you at the right time, the right place? Are you cool to work with? Are you going to make this better? And different people value different things.
You and I, because we are working in this field so adamantly, I think you and I both have directors that we admire and whose work we bring up often. I just saw, I love Errol Morris commercials. I like to reference them all the time. I know that you did recently as well. Love it, right? There's a lot of like deeper cuts of like, you will bring up an Ian Pons Jewel spot or something, and most people don't know who that is, even though he's directed all these incredible commercials. And you could be like, oh yeah, I love that guy's work. That's great. But do you ever not name drop, but reference a commercial director whose work you love in an advertising environment, and then it still falls flat? Do you know what I mean? Like, are you like? I feel like there's a lot of like creative directors. Like, there's a lot of people out there that like love art and media and all that stuff, but still don't know commercials.
Who
directed them, or just like they have a passion for the work, but maybe not the results necessarily.
Yeah, I've literally talked to creative directors about Super Bowl commercials they made, and I'll be like, "Who directed it?" And they'll be like, "I got to look it up." Unless it was like Martin Scorsese or something.
Right, exactly. And so it's like this weird disconnect where it's like, it's not weird to admire great work from people, and it's hard to know who made a commercial. Like you have to really, that it takes legwork, but it's worth it to figure out. And it's just strange to me. Like more frequently lately, it's just been like, oh, you see people's eyes glaze over when you reference the person who made the thing that we're all talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really funny to me.
And there's this odd thing that in the trades, like the advertising trades, Ad Age or LBB, Little Black Book, or all these kind of like, there's these magazines that talk a lot about advertising, Source Creative and Extreme Reach and stuff. Shots. They will have an article like, Christina Hendricks is headline is the new spokesperson for Juniper Networks. She does here's the creative director, here's the agency, here's the whole thing.
It doesn't bother me if people were like, who directed it? Whatever. And then they were like, oh, this shop made it or something like that. Like it's
right.
It's okay if it's not literally the director that they're familiar with, but like,
well, on that, usually they don't even mention the production company. It's as if there was no one producing this. Sure. All those articles are just talking about the agency.
Yeah, sure.
And the idea. But yeah, we're very much like tend to be dismissed, which I agree with you. Like, it's almost like if you know type of thing. Like if you're in this world, then it matters. It's like, I'm big in Japan. Like
it's totally fine for normal people not to know. I'm complaining about insiders not knowing.
It is. I know
that's my complaint.
Yeah, I know we're a little bit on a tangent, but I do think part of the reason being repped by a company makes a difference being on a roster, even though there's a lot of negatives to being exclusive with the company. One of the positives is that the companies in general, on average, are more famous than the directors.
Sure.
Tom Kuntz is probably one of the most successful directors right now, is probably less famous than MJZ, the roster that he's on. Or
yeah, 100%.
Tim Godsell, who's also probably one of the top directors right now, less famous than Anonymous Content.
Yeah,
and if you hear
I've
like
known Anonymous
Smuggler,
Content my entire life.
Yeah. O Positive.
Yeah.
Park Pictures. Partisan. Like you've heard these names. So I've seen creative directors make a list. Like here's some companies we should go to for directors: Hungry Man, Pretty Bird. Missing Pieces, whatever it is. So that is like one thing that you get from being on a roster is it's a little bit like being with CAA or William Morris, right?
Sure.
Or ICM. It's like these people tell us who is the coolest and best at their job. And so, we went to CAA to package our movie. UTA is selling our film at Sundance. That like, we don't know who at UTA, right? And if you tell me the name, it probably will mean absolutely nothing to me. But if you are deep in the indie film world, like you probably know some indie film agent names at UTA.
Yeah. I could have made some references, but
Becky,
also like, sure. Jessica.
But anyhow,
I can name people who've passed on my movies for sure. No problem.
Yes. But yeah, it is interesting. But on that note of trying to keep things interesting, let's jump in real quick to like I wanted to just make a list of things that we are not going to cover in our 2 wins and 2 losses episode, because I think what's valuable about winning and losing jobs and getting feedback when you can, which is surprisingly difficult. I mean, I have so many jobs I've lost where I was like, hey, thanks for, including me and considering me for this. I would love if you have any feedback to know like why I didn't get the job. Like, I'm not sad about it. I mean, obviously you're always sad when you lose.
Want to improve.
Yeah. And I'd say like 75% of the time when I ask for feedback on myself, I get no response. I just get ghosted. Yeah. Sometimes when a producer will ask for me on my behalf, maybe it's like easier for people to be like, well, Oren didn't plus this job, or didn't do this.
Yeah.
But there are some things that are totally out of your control.
Oren's a little,
he's a little much.
Yeah.
Talks too much.
It's just like,
I've gotten talks too much twice, like in the last month. Just so weird.
You're like, have you heard of my podcast?
I'm like, I know I talk too much, but I didn't realize other people noticed. But I guess they do. Anyhow, Matt, you've said enough. So here's a list of things that are totally out of your control. That are reasons that both you and I have like won and lost jobs because of. Number one, most obvious is the reel, right?
Reel, yeah.
And so what do you mean by that?
So the reasons you win or lose something, like, do you have work that is similar to what they're trying to make, right? This is well-trodden material on the podcast. I would say that like the reason you win thanks to your reel is like the similarities, and the losses, it's a little bit more complicated because the reel kind of gets you in the front door. And so like I've lost many, many, many jobs, like hundreds of jobs because of my reel, but I didn't even shortlist. A producer is like, oh, hey, like, I think you could be good for this. What do you have? And then I'm like, okay, well,
right.
Here's a
but
couple
you didn't
things
even get to pitch on the job.
I don't even pitch on it because the reel isn't. The reel is the first thing that gets you in the door or not, basically. So you win thanks to the reel. You don't even pitch thanks to the reel.
I think for me, like what I mean, like when I say like the reel is something that I can't control is, for instance, I lost a job last year to a director that, based on all my sleuthing, I actually knew someone at the agency personally, and I was told that my pitch was amazing, my treatment, who knows if it's true or not, but
sure,
according to him, best treatment, best pitch, best everything. But one of the other directors that you were up against had a Super Bowl commercial on his reel, and the client was excited to work with the Super. So basically, in not as many words, there was nothing I could have done to win that job once I was up against this director. And we've heard, I heard someone on another podcast, I forget which one, but talk about a director that all of a sudden they were able to get some really famous commercial director to direct this commercial. And even though they were down the path with another director, they're like, oh, hey, we're sorry, you're great, but we got this. It's like, oh, we're going to get like Tom Hooper to direct a musical, and he had just directed Les Miserables, like a musical commercial. So sorry, 3 mid-level directors, we're going to go with Tom Hooper because he said yes.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of the real is like, hey, they just, the work they've done is just in a different league than yours.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do and how great your idea and what treatment and how you pre-viz and pre-shoot and do everything, you're just not going to get the job.
Yeah. So in that sense, not pitching is kind of the kind thing to do, right? Like if, like, and this is the way the industry just tends to work. It's very, very rare that you are the new kid on the block and you just literally don't have a shot. Do you know what I mean? Like they tend to try and whatever league you're playing in, you're relatively evenly matched, more or less.
But sometimes you will get, like, for instance, we mentioned cat food. Maybe you've done this great cat food commercial that everyone's talking about, but the rest of your reel isn't like much to talk about. And so they'll put you in kind of a higher tier of directors to bid on this cat food commercial to see if you can bring it again. But then at the end of the day, you're still up against people that are doing $2 million commercials and you're doing $200,000 commercials. So you might not be as good.
What can I do there? Yeah. And I think that maybe the more obvious version of this is The Famous Director, which is the next on the list, right?
Right.
So a lot of these houses, the houses that you were just naming, where it's like, oh, we should go to Pretty Bird or Hungry Man or whatever.
Right. Let's have the Daniels direct this commercial.
Exactly.
The ones that won the Oscar a couple of years ago.
You're like, yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. And it goes back to my point before. You know, like lots of great commercials, people just don't know who directed them, right? And a production company's job is to educate people in a certain sense, or a sales rep to be like, oh, hey, you'll love Oren. He's done X, Y, and Z. It's so great, blah, blah, blah. I know this isn't really on brief, but this spot just popped off. It's so fun and so good. You know, you can that's what those relationships are there for, so that like someone can say, hey, I know this is to your taste, for instance. Or you'll get along with them really well or whatever. But when Martin Scorsese, you know, has a mortgage payment due or needs some money, you know, they can swoop in and take those jobs. I get it.
Yeah, I would too. Take a trip to Mexico City. Yeah. And this happens to actors all the time. Like, oh, we're going to audition. You did great. We're going to call you to do a callback. Great. We're going to do a chemistry. Great. Oh, Sandra Bullock said she'll do it.
She said yes. Yeah. And they'd been taught. The brutal part is that they were talking to Sandra Bullock's people the whole time. Right. But they still had to have a backup plan.
Yeah. So sometimes you are the backup plan and you're not needed.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but it's good to be in. I don't know. I'm a little torn on this. Everyone's always like, well, they loved you. They know that, you know, they'll think of you next time. But that, like, they'll think of you next time is like, happened to me like once out of 30 times. They'll think of you next time they actually do.
Yeah.
Obviously it's valuable, but it's not as valuable as I think people make it out to be.
Yeah. You know, 1 in 30 times if you're having 300 conversations, hey, that adds up. That's not so bad.
Yeah.
But that's
a lot of conversations. That's like years of conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the third thing, and this has happened to me, I think at least 3 times this year, is the budget. One director and says they can do it at a certain budget, and another director says they can do it for half the money.
Yeah. Let's unpack this a little bit because, you know, I just lived through this. I was really sweating it. I just won a job this morning. Thank you. I felt great about. And I got early feedback that was like, hey, they really loved you. You're the creative pick. We just have to make the money work.
Right.
And like, you hear that and immediately, like, you're like, yes, awesome. I knew it. And also, we've both lost jobs because the money didn't work. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you're bidding a job, when you're putting together the treatment and all that stuff, you're having conversations with producers of like those preliminary numbers. Oh, how many extras do you think you need for this scene? Do you think this location will work? how quickly can you get this done?
Yeah. You need the dolly, 2 cameras, 1 camera.
Exactly. Those kind of the big ballpark numbers, just to kind of rough things in. But you haven't won the job, and also you haven't gotten into any actuals. You don't really know if you need a prosthetic or CGI. You don't really know if you can pull off a company move that'll make this 2 days instead of 3. All of those logistics just take work to figure out. And you and I are both, maybe to a fault, pretty good at working with production to make it affordable. And so I literally, on this last job, I kind of gave a little spiel of like, hey, listen, historically, I've played ball and really made sure that I accommodated production as best I could and blah, blah, blah. And like, sometimes it kind of bites me in the ass. Like I want to make sure that when I say I need 17 extras, that I don't get 6,
Right.
because things get whittled down. It's so hard. And the money's really tight or whatever. And then when you hear like, hey, we loved your creative, we just have to make the numbers work, that fight or flight, that panic sets in, right? Of like, oh, shoot. Well, maybe I only need 6 extras. Like, let me get somebody on the phone. We'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm trying to do this thing where I'm like, where I put a stop, like, hey, at a certain point, we shouldn't be doing this job, because it's not someone first, and every job is doable, like, of course, you can shoot a commercial for $150,000, right? Like,
sure,
any idiot can shoot a commercial for $150,000. However, if you want to shoot it the way that I'm pitching it, where one day we're at the baseball field and the next day we're at a house and the next day we're on the street and we have to close down the street.
To improvise and like, whatever, the effects look perfect and like the rig is practical. So it's going to take 2 hours to reset or whatever it is. Like all the stuff that got them excited about how you're going to implement their idea.
Yeah. And even if you're willing to pull back, okay, so we won't improvise, and we'll try to do this all in one day, but now we can't light things, right? Now we can't get the extras we want. Now we can't do this. So it's like you're pitching, like I always think of scope, right? I'm pitching like an epic montage of a kid at a baseball game, right? Like kid at a baseball game, you need at least 30 extras, right? To just be around the kid, even if you're long lens, whatever, intercutting it with actual footage or whatever, trying to film at a real game. Like then you need the lighting for it to some degree, right? And then now you want to shoot the car scene, but it's night. Like all these little decisions you make are what's going to determine whether the production value is there that is in line with like what you as a filmmaker want to be known for, So yeah, the budget sucks, but what Scott Feinstein, a previous guest of ours, said, if you are the creative's pick and you're like $10,000 above the competition, you'll probably win the job because the creative should trump the production, like the little numbers. And if it doesn't, then it's probably not a great project to begin with.
Well, and speaking of being wrapped, and this isn't really, it's not exclusive to being wrapped, but the advantage of working with producers regularly, where you have a rapport and an understanding and a shorthand, the more you work with people, the better they get at understanding what you need and vice versa. Right. So the job that I was on, or that I just won this morning, it's the first time I've worked with any of these people. And so, there's a calibration that needs to happen of like, okay, the money's really tight. What does that mean? Does that mean, oh boy, there's not going to be sushi at lunch? Or does that mean I'm going to be like borrowing somebody's nephew's tripod? Do you know what I mean? So that's always tricky. Do you ever look at budgets? Do you ever get to crack open the numbers? And
very rarely. I have kind of been digging in a little deeper recently on that stuff. But yeah, when you get a call from your producer and they're like, do you need a first AD? It's a pretty...
No.
I forgot. You're like so weird with your anti-AD
no
sentiment.
And I think actually
and pro script supervisor sentiment.
I'm pro. Yeah, that's so funny. I'm very, very pro scripty.
So if I think we've had this totally stupid debate that I would love for people to email us or message us on Instagram.
Certainly you need a first AD for sure.
Like,
yeah.
You would choose between first AD and script supervisor every time.
It does depend on like how much wrangling is to be done. You know, like if everyone's on set and good to go, no, you still have to have one.
Well, so the last reason that we had on this list here is that there's some sort of relationship with your competition with who they're pitching to, right? So whether they have worked on this campaign before, whether they're related, this is my nephew wants a shot at this. Sometimes they, like when you're pitching on a job, they just need to have 3 people pitch on it or multiple people, but really they've already made the decision ahead of time. And you're kind of there just like as the token pitcher.
Yeah.
And that sucks too, but there's nothing we can do about that.
I wish, let me ask, would it be nice to know?
Yeah.
What would you do?
I mean, I pitched on this thing last year where it was not my production company, a different production company. And there were 3 different directors that pitched on it. One of the 3 was with the production company that was pitching, but no matter who won the job, we would have to go through this production company. And I said to the EP at the production company, I'm like, well, don't you think that's a little unfair? Like your director is probably going to get it. And she was like, no, we're doing it really fair. We're not like helping him out with the treatment. We're just trying to keep it all like on the, up and up. And then he won the job, so I don't know, like maybe, I mean, he's a good director, I think my pitch was pretty strong. I saw the final product. I didn't see.
Boy, it's rough when you see the final product on a job you didn't win.
Yeah. I didn't see what was brought to it that was like anything better than what I would have done,
Yeah. I can think of a couple of jobs, but one in particular where I was like, where I was like, oh, I definitely would have done a better job. This is bad in comparison to what I brought to the most of the time. I'm like, oh, cool. This is really awesome. Kudos. But when they're bad, it makes my blood boil.
Yeah. For me, it's like, sometimes I'm happy they're bad, but if I fought really hard to get the job and was really sad about not getting it, then I get kind of bummed. I don't know.
I think the takeaway is what idiots we are.
Yeah, it's all emotional too. It's like you can say it's not, but it is.
No, it is. It is. And also like, it's quite foolish to let so much of your emotional well-being and happiness
rely on this stuff.
Yeah. It's really, it's folly. Don't do it. So if you're 20, 21, 22, maybe think of a different game. I don't know.
No, I don't know. I mean, we still love it. We're still doing it.
We're smack dealers, Oren.
When you win,
that's the problem.
It feels really good.
Yeah.
For like 10 seconds, and then you're like, God damn, there's no way we can pull this off.
Just a taste. Yeah.
Well, so we wanted to go through that list first because none of the examples that we're going to talk about from our own career are affected by these things. I mean, I'm sure everything's affected a little bit, but we wanted to talk about jobs where we learned a reason we either won the job or lost the job, and it affected the way we pitched moving on. So do you want, I'd love to go first because I want to prove to you that we can make it through this whole thing in 20 minutes.
By all means.
Okay. So my first win. So it was a campaign for Target. It had real specific talent in it. It was not the Kristen Wiig Target lady spots, which are awesome, directed by Tom Kuntz, but shot at the same Target that we filmed at.
Is that? I didn't realize it was Tom Kuntz. That's interesting.
Yeah, and they did 2 rounds of it. And they filmed in the North Hollywood Target where we filmed. It's a film-friendly Target, and the people I was up against, one was a director that had worked with this talent in like dozens of commercials. And it was really kind of an expert, almost like defining the genre. And the other director I was up against made a studio feature film starring very famous actors that involved this talent that just came out last year. And this director had also directed other studio feature films and won Sundance and all the things. Sure. Okay, so that's one director come up against the other one is kind of define the genre. And then it's me who had kind of had one commercial on my reel that was in the vein of this creative, which is how I got into the bid pool. And I actually mentioned this on the podcast before, but the other thing they liked about me is that they liked all my breakdowns on Instagram, my behind the scenes stuff. And they were like, we really like you kind of letting us into your process. And we think for this specific project, because there's a lot of people that are going to be interested in every detail, we want someone that can really share with us their process. So I think part of the reason I got the job was just that they had told me that. And in my pitch back to them, I explained to them, this is how I do animatics. This is how I do treatment, previs, all the stuff.
Let me ask, do you ever recycle any of those pages? Like that copy and stuff?
The only copy that I ever recycle, I mean, I always like retype it, but in the casting section, I almost always say something to the effect of, I love actors. I married so much that I married one. And then I mentioned something about casting being
That's not bad.
The first time that the agency, that I can actually sit down with the agency creatives and see the script come to life and see what's working, what's not working, timing, figure out timing,
what people
pacing.
get. Yeah. That's good.
But even it's the first time where we're actually next to each other being creative together. And that's why I love the casting process. And then of course the casting comes and I'm like, oh my God, so tired.
And they're
so tired of talking to
anyway.
like the 200th actor. Anyhow, that's usually the only thing I recycle. But the previs, and there is one thing I had like for my Rebel thing. I did the previs, and I have it side by side with like the final footage, and I made it a GIF, and I used that same GIF in a few different treatments, just like, this is how I previs, and this is how what it looks like.
Yeah, that's great.
But the other thing I did for the Target one specifically is I went with my kids to Target and I filmed like it wasn't at all like the things that happen in the commercial, but it was in the same spirit of what happens in the commercial. It was like tonally similar. We kind of ran around Target. I put my kids in the shopping cart. I kind of filmed all over the store, had made fun angles with my iPhone, and literally the treatment was due like the next day. And I was like, this treatment feels impersonal. I just need to go to Target. I'm like, I just need to go there. I need to put a picture of me at Target, me and my kids at Target in the beginning of the treatment, in the middle of the treatment, and at the end of the treatment. And it will go from being this generic treatment to an Oren Kaplan treatment.
Nancy Myers, I was right.
Oh, nice. So anyhow, when I got the job and I was doing the location scout with the Target people, I was like, hey, who was I up against? And they told me, I was like, holy cow, like, why on earth would you even talk to me? These other directors are so amazing. And they're like, well, we just like that you went to Target. And I was like, but doesn't everyone in America go to Target? They're like, yeah, but you're the only one that put it in your treatment. So lesson learned that there is this kind of like, I think we think as human beings, like you work for Heinz Ketchup, like you don't actually care about Heinz Ketchup. Why do I need to pretend that I love Heinz Ketchup? But if you work for Heinz Ketchup, you've spent so much time digging into the ethos of the brand, the color palette, why they do their things that they do, what Heinz means in the scope of history. And when you see someone that wants to work with you, caring about all this useless nonsense that all of a sudden it makes them be someone you want to work with. So when I'm like thinking so deeply about Target and experiencing it, I think there's a value in that. And that's
100%.
something I want to do in like every treatment moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like, I want to augment that a tiny bit. You could tell because I kept stuttering over your.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I should have let you finish your statement. Anyway, it doesn't matter if it's Heinz Ketchup or Target or whatever. Yes, it's you care about Target, but you also care about doing good work. And the difference between you or just a person who wins the job and maybe a big fancy Hollywood director who's made some movies that are really cool, or whatever, other people, is showing the work and showing the passion and interest. Like on the last treatment that I did, the producer that I was working with really hit home like we need to show them that we thought about everything, even though we're not down the road of production yet. Like, here are the location pulls that we're already thinking about, and this is how great they're going to look. Here is how we're approaching casting, and this and that. Here's the color grade. Every single tiny detail, the stuff that we care about the most, and the stuff that like essentially an agency is hiring us to care about, right? Like they know more about Target and care more about Target than we do, but we care about doing great work on their behalf. And that if we can show them in novel ways, that's going to mean something to them. If we can show them, hey, it's worth it for me to show you that I get the tone of this piece, whether it's Target or any other thing. If you have the ability to go try the new Super Taco at Taco Bell and talk about it, that's just professionalism. And there are a lot of commercial directors out there, especially ones that have a lot of prestige, that maybe don't go the extra mile to like do that work. You know?
Yeah, they try to get the entire job because they have a great reel.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. And look, we just talked about the reasons why we don't win jobs against people. That's what we're talking about. Is like sometimes the great reel wins, and on them. That's the luxury. That's the privilege that they have earned from all a career's worth of great work
from their portfolio. Yeah. I did.
Yeah.
I had a pitch this morning where I did not do a deep dive into the brand. And now that we're talking about it, I wonder if they could feel that.
Yeah.
I literally mispronounced the brand name like right in the beginning. But anyhow,
you know, that's a good segue into I'm going to go a little out of order. I had a win early the year before last, that Reddit job that I did. It was a pretty big campaign, and celebrity, exactly.
Reddit from many shows,
Parks and Rec and Good Girls, most famously. But when we first were having those conversations, there were other people in the mix as well, and so
other directors,
other celebrities, other celebrities. Like, we were all kind of circling around a handful of different people. They were fielding calls and all of that stuff. And then the morning of, I found out definitively that it was going to be Retta and not any of the other people that we were talking about. And, I think that like, there's mixed feelings, there's mixed emotions on that, right? Like, you kind of have all of the different versions of the spots in your mind, and then immediately like you're mourning some of them. Some of them just aren't going to happen, right? And that's not like a qualitative judgment. I love the Reddit spots, but like it would have been interesting to do the spots with other people, right? And I knew that the creatives really had put their heart and their soul into these. And they were really thinking about a lot of different people and big fans of all sorts of different people. And, that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. But the thing that I did is I did the layout myself on this one. And I really had like, kind of like gotten nice and skilled up on
like the treatment design
layout design, all that stuff. I think most of it maybe I had a little bit of help, but like I did some custom photoshopping, all that stuff. So the morning of, at like 5 a.m, I realized, oh, great, East Coast time. I've got 90 minutes before this thing goes. I go through and change any image that is a different celebrity, that's a different one of the different options. It all becomes Retta. So the morning, like, again, it's breaking news. That morning, everything becomes Retta. And it's a similar sort of thing of like, oh, I'm going to show you how committed I am, how excited I am. And they're still in that process of like thinking through like, oh, who is this going to be? And I'm like, no, Retta is the person I'm the most excited for. And that's true. It was authentic. I was so stoked for her. And so it's nice. It's nice that like, oh, some of the other people that were in the mix, I was less keen on. But the combination of changing the graphics and then being excited about that person and inspiring the excitement in the rest of the team, opening their eyes up to the possibilities creatively and comedically, I'm certain is what got me the job. For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I am curious, like, because I've had producers tell me to remove images of other celebrities from a treatment that we're sending to a different celebrity, you know?
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, but this is the idea. It's like she did it. Scarlett Johansson did it in this movie, and we're going to have this other actor do it in this. And they're like, let's just not have it, either a non-famous, like generic person or them. But don't. So, but I do think coming in and being committed and being interested, it kind of reminds me of like that Target job when they told me why they chose me. It set me up for feeling really good about myself to pitch on it. And when you are going into like a talent and you're like, hey, we love you for this, you're like uniquely suited to play this role. It makes them just much more interested in playing that role.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I actually was just talking to another director, and he's like, "Oh, do you sometimes see actors in an audition, and at the end you're like, oh, by the way, I loved you in, your episode of Hacks or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, actually, I try to do that in the beginning of the audition because I want them to be
stoked.
Be stoked and be excited and be like, oh yeah, you're like feeling so legit that like they were recognized by the person running the audition." And he told me, he's like, well, I used to do that, but then sometimes they'd get nervous. And like I had put expectations on them.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think I tend to not be that. I can think of a couple times where someone would come in and I'm like, oh my God, I love this person. But they were on a TV show from like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. If they're kind of like washed up, it's one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not even that they were washed up. It's like, I can think of instances where it's like, oh, you were just a kid. And I loved that show as a kid as well. And now we're both adults and you're a working actor. But you don't want it to be like, well, boy, you're auditioning for this commercial instead of being a series regular on that television show that I love. Like that's a little iffy, I think.
Yeah. But today, it's crazy. Yesterday, I read this article in Deadline that Zendaya had auditioned for the Descendants movies like multiple times, like learn the dances, learn the songs, and they're like, she was great, but she just wasn't the right choice for this movie. And it's like, then she goes on to be like, biggest star in the world. And it's interesting. Sometimes it's just, people love you, but you're just not. It's just not the right fit.
Sure.
For some reason.
I think about I'm working on a job specifically where I need to be thinking about this a lot. But do you know who Chappell Roan is, Oren?
I do.
You do.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
After this.
So she's
after
like,
I finish recording.
For any listener at home who's listening to this later or whatever, we're right in the middle of Chappell Roan's
meteoric rise.
Rise. She just played Lollapalooza like 2 days ago. And there's like footage of like 100,000 people all doing like the hot to go dance in synchronicity together. Right. And it's all being cut with her like 2 years ago playing to 50 people, that same song.
Oh, that's cool.
In like a fucking like on a stage, like barely on a stage, just with her keyboard and like a red outfit.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like pre-drag inspiration. Pre-fame, pre-fame. But not just fame, but like transformation. Do you know what I mean? Right. She was like, oh, like I'm a girl from the Midwest who sings well, into like, oh, pop icon. But she was on, I want to say Atlantic. She was on a major label. She got discovered on YouTube, and then they dropped her with Pink Pony Club as her single. And then another, like somebody else picked her up. But like, I just thinking about like literally had their record executives who decided to fire her even after they had that single, which turned out to be the single of the summer. So like, there's just the taste factor of like, oh, well, we know, or you weren't right for this time or whatever. I would love to be a fly on the wall where they have to explain to their bosses that like the pop phenomenon of the year they fired.
Yeah. Happens all the time. But sometimes that firing is like part of what fires you up too.
Yeah, maybe. But it's literally the same song.
Speaking of getting fired, I'm now going to admit to you that I was wrong about how many of these will be able to fit. So 1 win and 1 loss. But I think if people like this, we will. Yeah, we can easily do more wins and
we're
losses.
Not deleting the
list there. Yeah. So I'm gonna just do my loss real quick. My theory is that these will be pretty fast because we ended up not getting the job. Yeah. So I have a lot less information, but I bid on a job for this drug called Opzelura. It's like an eczema drug. It's a pharma job, which, means like a pharmaceutical commercial. They're famous for being kind of stifling creatively in some ways. There's many, many, many legal limitations.
Running for a long time. Running a really long time.
Yeah, they run for a long time, but they have...
Actors buy houses.
Ginormous
on pharma jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people do them because they pay really well. And sometimes you can have some fun with visuals and things. Mm-hmm. So I bid on this one for Opzelura, which, by the way, I just saw run during the Olympics. I was going to say, such a bummer.
I'm seeing it run now. Do you have a pharma reel? Like, how did you get in the mix on this?
It's kind of like whimsical and fun. And like this one woman is like running through all these different environments and there's fun transitions from one environment to the next and kind of graphical text and things. I mean, yeah, the full long version, which I don't think is playing right now. I think they're kind of playing like 30s, but like I think there was like a 2-minute version or something. It just had a lot of interesting text treatments. And I don't know, somehow I got in the mix. I pitched with Undivided, my Canadian reps, and I think the pitch went really, really well. I made this like awesome treatment. I, did all these graphics. I showed them how there's a part where the clouds, right? Like eczema or something. And I kind of like did it and did the animation and talked about casting and found locations and did all the things. We're going to shoot on a backlot. It was going to be really cool. And I pitched it like on a Monday and it went well. I was like, oh, that treatment was so good. Asked me all these questions. And the next couple of days are like, what about this thing? And can we move this thing in the budget? All the things. The agency was like very much engaged in making
signs.
Yeah. Figuring out how to make it work. And they're like, okay, we're going to present it to the client, but they didn't present it to the client till 9 days later. So like not the following Monday, but the next Wednesday was when they talked to the client. So all that energy from the pitch was like totally zapped out. And according to what we heard, who knows if this is true or not, but rumor has it that the agency went in, 4 agency people, and it was split even, 2 and 2. 2 were like Team Oren. The other 2 were Team Freddie, this guy named Freddie. And they presented the treatment. They presented my beautiful PDF file. That I don't think it even had GIFs. I think it was like, it was kind of, it's a little elevated and refined. So it wasn't like my usual comedy GIF filled treatment. They presented my, 40-page treatment, and they presented Freddie's video treatment. And the client was like, well, I see Freddie's video and I know exactly his point of view, his personality, how he's going to shoot this. And I see this long ass PDF document that I trudge through.
It doesn't even move.
And I think I'm going to go with Freddie, which, by the way, this guy ended up being like voted like top 10 director of the year by like every organization in the world. He has his own production company called Drool, Drool. He's like an incredible director. And even since we pitched against each other, his reel has like grown exponentially. He's like, does amazing miniatures and graphics, VFX, like such good stuff. And he did it like seeing the final spot. It's pretty similar to what I pitched. Like, I don't know that it would have come out so different if I directed it. But he is a really talented director. But what I learned from that loss was frickin' make a video treatment if you really want the job. And if the client is, if there's a budget and the client is going to make a big decision and you are not going to be able to interact with the client, the best way to interact with them is to make a video. So my next job I pitched with Undivided, my EP there was like, Scott was like, why don't you just make a video treatment? Like Freddie did it and he won. It's like, I don't know if it's that easy. So I made a video treatment for Pinterest, won that job, also against some kind of big heavyweights. Next job, I made a video treatment for Home Equity Bank and won that job. And I was like, holy cow, it's unlosable. Video treatments, you cannot lose. And then next job, American job, I made the video treatment and I lost it. It was to the guy that was with the company. And then I haven't made a video treatment since then.
Yeah, there's a little bit of luck of the draw to it, right? Because we're downplaying a PDF, but there's a reason that it's the standard document format for every single business out there. It's like being able to print something, hand it to someone, look at it on their phone, a volume off sort of environment, go through at your own pace. You can spend 2 minutes on page 2 and 16 minutes on page 4 and 30 seconds on every other page or whatever. You know what I mean? You can point, like, scrubbing through a video is complicated. All that stuff is complicated and weird. And like, you don't know under what circumstances your media is going to be displayed to people,
Yeah. And I will say that with my Pinterest video treatment, they were like, we love this. Can you make a PDF?
Sure.
And we made a PDF, like a 10-page PDF to go with that. But we already had like the feeling that we were going to get the job. So it was less painful. It's never painful to make a treatment if you think you have the job.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of my takeaway from that loss was that, if you are looking in the camera and talking about how you're going to pitch it, that goes beyond the agency. It gets all the way to the client. And if, as Scott, my EP at Undivided said, some people are good at this. Some directors are really good at this and some directors are not really good at this. He's like, you happen to be like pretty decent on a call. And so for you, I would recommend doing this. Yeah. And it worked.
Well, let us know the next time you decide to do it. And I'd love to see them.
Well, sure.
Unpacking it a little bit more. Are you literally just like at your desk talking to the camera?
Yes. The main framing of it is me at my desk, same desk I record the podcast on. I talk into my podcast microphone because I want the audio to be good. And I'm usually just filming on my iPhone because I want the video to not be that good because I don't want it to be like compared with the final product. I think I shot on my A7S a couple times just because like my background was like messy. So I just wanted it out of focus. But then I intercut just a ton of footage on top of it.
Sure.
For the Pinterest one, it was like kind of a docu style comedy thing. And I intercut it with me. Basically I started the treatment with saying like, hey, I'm going to try to do this really fast because I got a crazy busy weekend. It's my son's birthday party. And, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble if I don't finish my to-do list. So here goes. And then, like 5 minutes into it, I get a call from my wife and she's like, have you picked up the bagels already? And I'm like, of course. Why are you even why do you even feel like you need to ask me that? And then it cuts to me with my kids running the bagel shop, So it's like a lot of like, there is
to it, but
yeah. And it was kind of like the Office, Veep, Modern Family kind of type inspiration for that whole project. So I tried to put that in my treatment. The other one, Home Equity Bank, was about, there were clones, like multiple copies. So, I had like a different version of me walk into the room during the treatment and like say some things, but it's all done like in the cheapest, easiest, like quickest way you can do. Like I literally would just take my iPhone and like pan it and then just like,
I think that's the move though, because it shouldn't feel too produced. It needs to be relatable in some way to people.
And it needs to feel like I just made it by myself in my room, like that I'm a filmmaker,
Right. Yeah, really good. Awesome. Well, that segues me perfectly into my loss, which was a job that kind of came in. I was really excited for the creative. I thought was good. It was a company that I worked with before, and Jordan Brady ended up winning.
Freaking Jordan Brady. Can't make it through an episode without mentioning that guy.
I know. Geez Louise. But so the thing about it, the lesson was, through kind of funny circumstances, I ended up pitching it twice. Basically, it was a creative duo, and the first time I pitched it, only one of the two parties was there. And it was after we'd already had a chemistry call, so I don't know why. I can't remember the details as to why we ended up doing it twice. That first time, I crushed it. The energy was great. Everyone was he was laughing. We were kind of like pitching and yes-anding each other's jokes. It was great. It was just like one of the sort of the feeling you get when you're done. You're like, oh man, I think I probably won that one. Like it couldn't have gone better, at least, right? I left it all on the table. But their creative partner wasn't there for it, and so only
so it's like a duo that is like working at the advertising agency, and only one of them showed up to the pitch.
Exactly. And the other one was on vacation, so it wasn't like I was getting stood up or whatever. But there were two stakeholders. It was like the creative director and the copywriter. Or, I don't remember what the dynamic was officially, and so maybe they were just vetting me for the first time, and they only, the other person came in for, only the serious pitches. I don't know. Like, I can't imagine they didn't have time to hear all three pitches. But for whatever reason, the energy wasn't there the second time around. And I realized that, when you're talking to a team, every time you talk to a team,
when you say the energy, your energy wasn't there, or the synergy of the group wasn't.
The synergy of the group.
The magic wasn't.
The magic wasn't there. The lightning was no longer in the bottle.
Right.
But so the reason that I bring it up is because it's a good lesson to be reminded every single time you talk to a team, you should come locked and loaded with new, fresh, exciting ideas. And I know that sounds hard because, you already put all the great ideas you had into the treatment or the script or whatever, but the conversation bears fruit every time. Like, oh, they really liked this, so you plus that, you lean into it more, you give it more time. Of course, there's room to improve things. And I think because that first call had gone so well, I was resting on my laurels a little bit, maybe not realizing, just not staying as competitive as I needed to in order to have won it. And so, but the big takeaway for all of it is that even in a chemistry call, at any touch point, coming with that full sincerity, that full energy, that full excitement, and also new, fresh ideas is kind of imperative to stay competitive, right? Like I think we talked about it on the last episode, but chemistry calls, I think we both used to take them at face value, where it's like, just like, oh, I'm going to learn what this spot is. And that's a missed opportunity to come in getting them excited about new ideas.
Yeah.
Even if they're ideas that they've already pitched and had to shut down for some reason, but it's a mini pitch before the real pitch, basically.
Yeah. It's funny. My wife had a table read today. She's doing a CBS show. She's, she has a small part. She's in 2 scenes, but they asked her at the table read if she would read for a different part. And that other part was like this, like, mom whose son had just died and is like going through this legal battle, and like kind of an emotional, dramatic part. And she said, like, we're going through the table read, and most of the people that were reading like a bunch of parts were just kind of reading them, and she's like, but I felt like, this is like an audition. I got to be like emotional. I got to get the tears. She's like, I hope people didn't think I was like an ass kisser or something, but like, I just went all in. I went for the performance, because like any opportunity you have to just put your best foot forward, even if people are like, yeah, you don't need to put your best foot forward. Just give us a 1-page treatment. Like,
the ad, just give us a couple pages.
Yeah.
Don't believe that. Don't believe it. Go for it.
Just think about what the craziest person is going to do and try to be a little bit crazier than them.
Yeah. Or I mean, sure, if competition is what gets you going, for sure. But like, to me, the thought process with all of these is like, what can I do to make this as awesome as possible? How, like, take it to the furthest extent of your imagination. What's literally like, oh, okay, I'm going to do a video pitch. Okay, sure. video pitch is cool. I'll sit down in front of my desk and, talk it through them and I'll do a great performance. Is that as good as going to Target and like doing a little bit and like shooting examples of what you're talking about? No, plus it. Go for it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I find that just going there is easier actually than figuring out something clever to say in your room,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you've got the vlogger's playbook right there.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Or instead of running around with an Osmo 6 before we know it.
Yeah. So I guess the rule there, right? Like the learning lesson is always be interested, always be passionate, always give it your all, knowing completely that there's a very good chance you will not only not get the job, but you will not be paid for any of the work you've done. And potentially they'll take one of your ideas and use it with someone else. And that is just part of the business. And at some point, and we always end up on both sides of that, like unwittingly, someone will be like, oh, we want to do it this way. And you didn't know that they want to do it that way because somebody else pitched it. Yeah. So it's just part of the deal is like, if you try to keep your ideas for when you actually get the job, then they'll give the job to the person that was just had a million ideas to begin with.
Yeah. Or who made a movie that the creative director really loves.
Yeah, for sure that.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Matt, do you have just a minute to do some endorsing?
I do. Oren, I've got an unpaid endorsement that
I'm listening.
It's a wholehearted, truly sincere endorsement that you were really going to laugh at me for.
Is it reclining? Because you're doing a lot of it on this episode.
Yeah, guys. It's 11 o'clock.
The boom mic holder. What do you call this?
We have very nice
boom arm
microphone arms.
It's gone lower and lower on the screen the longer we talk.
My unpaid endorsement is enjoying the fruit from fruit carts in Los Angeles.
Oh, yes. It's really expensive.
It is very expensive. I knew you were going to say that.
Well, because it's like this thing that was $5 my entire life, and all of a sudden it's like $15.
Yeah. You can easily spend $15. I spent $10, and $10 is totally a reasonable amount of money. I think that's actually a good value
from this. These are in Los Angeles. There's people with carts and fruit, and they cut them up for you and give them to you. Put some lime juice, some tagine.
Yeah. Lime juice, just tagine, maybe a little chamoy if you want to get a little spicy. So this summer, now that I have a toddler, they always want snacks, and she's a mango fiend.
Yeah,
loves mango. And honestly, I didn't know how much I love mango until I had a toddler. And I was like, oh, a ripe mango is an immaculate fruit. It is as good as it gets. Yeah. So
they're a little hard to peel unless you can use a peeler.
That's the magic of the fruit cart, right? That's part of the experience you're paying for. So for listeners at home who aren't familiar, they're in like kind of public places. You're at the park, you're at the museum, you're at the zoo. Those tend to be or I guess maybe like busy pedestrian streets like the mall or like the Hollywood Boulevard or whatever, and they've got kind of iconic like the rainbow umbrella and stuff. I go mango, watermelon combo is a good move. I love tahini. My kid's like a little skeptical of it, but I think she's pretty into it. So sometimes they'll just give you a little bit on the side, and then pineapple as well. But it's always super, super fresh. Every interaction I've had has been utterly pleasurable. Like everyone's like happy and excited. It's kind of, it's a little bit of a splurge. You're right. Like you get a mango or whatever else, a pineapple for less money, but I don't get to participate in street food very often as a vegetarian. So having the unlock,
you don't eat those. You don't make an exception for those hot dogs wrapped in bacon.
I would love to, Oren.
I don't either.
They smell so good. The fruit cart is such a treat, and I'm sure, like obviously, it's not only Los Angeles. There are many, many places.
Yeah,
you can have them,
there's fruit. I think they have fruit in other cities. Not sure.
Though, buddy, when you travel, you're like, oh, right, we live in the breadbasket.
It's not even an endorsement. It's just something I do. I've noticed as a person that enjoys beer but doesn't know a ton about beer, it's just kind of the general rules I've developed for myself is if it's hot, I drink a lager, like a Corona or a Dos Equis or a Pacifico, like usually a Mexican lager. And if it's like cold or I want to be like a little cozier, I'll drink like an IPA, the Lagunitas IPA, or I also like Hefeweizen, like the wheat beers, like like I like the Golden Road and Hefeweizen, and there's also the Allagash White, and the Belgian stuff. And so if you are a person that doesn't know anything about beer like me, but you're just trying to find like a couple guidelines of what to order, it's for me, I just find it's hot. I like the really light lager, Mexican lager. When it's cold, I like the heavier IPA, or as a softer, more citrusy flavor, Hefeweizen. So that's my weird half endorsement. Well, anyhow, we'd love to hear about your wins and losses. Would we? No, a little bit if they're interesting.
Yeah.
It's less about what you won and lost on, and more about what you learned from winning and losing.
That's exactly right. I don't care if you got like a very cool campaign or not. I want to know what you learned specifically.
One of our listeners who's become a friend, Michael Ryan Fagan, I think has reached out to us. He reached out to me when we were up against each other for a PayPal job. I think he was up against you for a lottery job, and Tom. And he is a guy, a picture perfect guy of someone that's like, hey, why did you win this job? Tell me. And because we're idiots, we tell him. And then he's like, great. Now I'm going to take what I learned and I'll win the next job. And he told me like right after we had the conversation about PayPal, he's like, hey, I changed this thing I did because of our conversation and I won the next job. So
great.
Anyhow,
there you go.
I love those stories of just figuring out how to get better and not, spending too much time being bummed you didn't get the job.
Yeah, I like that too.
So email us if you got a story, justshootitpod@gmail.com. You can find us across all social media on Instagram, especially on Instagram at justshootitpod. I'm on Instagram at okaplan.
And I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow across all social media. This episode was edited by Noah Bayshore. Thank you, Noah. And produced by him as well, along with additional producing by Tyler Small. You're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Chazar. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.